everyone, welcome to the Hitchhiker's Way podcast. Today, I think it's going to be an amazing show. Jason Cohen joined us and he built the foundation of two unicorn companies, WP Engine and Smart Bear. So, I think this podcast is going to be filled with value. So, how's it going, Jason?
Well, the pressure's on now, so we better get going and get some value right now.
Yeah. So, how does it feel that knowing that you've built two unicorn companies right now and you're running one? Does young Jason feel happy about it?
Yes, because that's what I always wanted. Is well, not unicorns actually. I didn't actually care about that ever. Um, I actually just wanted to make my own stuff, and I didn't like being an employee. The same reasons that everyone starts companies. You just kind of have to. So in that sense, yeah, it's really nice to have succeeded in that after 25 years. So it's not for nothing. But
Right.
on the other hand, you have kind of this problem. Well, it's not really a problem and boo-hoo, but you have this question of like, what do you do next? Because another one of these is not the answer. And on the other hand, different place in life, different desires, different abilities, or less abilities for some kinds of cognitive things, right? And energy, but of course more experience and money I can put towards things. So it changes like what are the constraints, but also what should I do? So um, it's sort of like how Eric Ries, who was one of the angel investors in WP Engine, the lean startup guy, right? Like he wrote Lean Startup. It got really popular, and now he can never make another company because if it wasn't fantastically popular, it would be everyone would point to that and say that's why Lean Startup is wrong. So in a funny way, being successful at promoting software meant he couldn't really never start another company. And so it's a funny thing. So it's not boo-hoo, but rather it's an interesting question of like what would be next.
So you're still looking for what's next for you.
Well, not like a new company, but yeah, like what it means to grow or be successful or strive for something. There's expectations I guess people have. Maybe you shouldn't care. Maybe you should. I mean, these are things we all struggle with, really.
So speaking about success and childhood, can you give a background to yourself? Like, how was your childhood and how did it really shape how you live your life today? Like,
No, I
how's it?
can't really, and not because I'm not willing to talk about it. I'll talk about whatever. It's just not that interesting. And also, I don't think it really. So, for example, you talk to one person and they say, uh, "My mother was a neat freak," and so she always made me keep my room completely clean and blah blah blah. And so I just got this. I just got it ingrained into me to like keep things neat. So today I'm a neat freak because that was just built, just ingrained into me when I was a kid. Then you talk to the next person and they say, my mother was a neat freak and it was like beat into me as a kid. So as soon as I left, I was like, I'm never doing that again. And, I was messy from then on because like, oh my God. And so then the question is like, what did your mom do again? Like, how did that affect you again? Really? Is it? So obviously, it's very true that people are born into having more or less opportunities or economic conditions or having horrible things happen to them as opposed to just not having, I don't know, connections or something. There's obviously a lot of things that can be formative and can matter a lot, but in general I don't think those other kinds of like cultural things are really that important. I think when I see founders, I just see outliers. I don't see people who are like anything that they grew up with or their family. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, so and so in my family was an entrepreneur. I follow their footsteps, but most aren't. And again, like my example I just gave, I'm not sure that's really that relevant actually. My parents were both in education and nothing to do with entrepreneurship. So what? Like that obviously didn't matter. I think it's more interesting to say like, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? If you have an idea, how do you convert that into something? If you are working on something, what is the next step? How do you decide what's important? If you're scaling, it's a whole nother set of challenges that are different again to starting. Like to me, these are the practical and interesting types of questions.
Having built a lot of companies before, when you're testing out an idea in the early product stage, you tend to talk to a lot of customers, right?
Mhm.
And have you found a way to navigate through this way of getting a good feedback and building on features that people really want and focusing on a feature that would really scale?
Well, these are all
That
different
way.
questions. Features that'll scale, features that people want. I would say yes and no. I do have a system which I'm happy to for interviewing customers, so I'll tell you that. Um, at the same time, I think all of us have had that experience where you talk to five people, you say, "Ooh, we're thinking about building this feature next," and they all say, "Oh, good, finally, that's going to be great," and then they don't use it. And so, what's up with that? So, I have some thoughts about that as well, because it totally happens. It still happens to me. So, it's not, I don't know, like. I think there's something you can do about it, but it's not perfect, right? It's some of that is just life, I think. So the way I approach interviewing customers, first of all, the wrong way is to approach it like a sales pitch, which is often how we do it because we're so excited and we so want the answer to be that they love our idea and they're going to buy it. Like we want that to be the answer so bad. So we end up pitching, "Oh, did you ever have this problem?" And they're like, "I guess." "Oh man, well, we do this and look at that." And you're excited and you should be. And that's infectious. And what are they going to do after all that? Tell you like this sucks? I mean, some people might actually, but most people are like, "Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, sure, I'll buy it," and they don't, right? So that kind of sales pitch is not what you should do because you won't learn anything and they're not really getting right feedback. What you're trying to do is learn stuff. So the first thing I do is I wonder, what am I trying to learn in the first place? Is it features? It could be like what features people want, but there's a lot of other things. Again, especially since people often say, "I'll buy a feature," and then they don't. So, okay, that's fine. It's not like we shouldn't seek that. But there's other things we can probably learn, and even with higher fidelity than that. And so we should try. So, like, that might be things like, what language does the customer use to describe the problem? Because it's probably different from yours. So, as a funny example, Discord, of course, is a place where people have they build communities there in the real word community. It's whether you want to call it chat, whether you want to call it threaded chat, whether you want to call it a discussion group, a community, whatever, that's what it is. They call it a server. Now that's weird. A server is not the first word that comes to my mind. Also, it isn't a server. It's it's not like they warm up a whole server for you. That's not what they do. It's not a server. Like what the hell are they doing calling it a server? The reason is because early on, when they were trying to tell people what it is, what they found is that kids were literally getting a $5 server from some cheap place to host some kind of forums or games or something. And so for them to say you get a free server, that linked to what the customers were thinking at the time and what they were doing. So it's not about like what you think it is and what you say it is and your vision and your strategy or even what it really is in real life, which is not a server. It's not even accurate, doesn't matter. Like what matters is what will resonate with your customers, what they're saying, what they're doing. And you see, when you talk to them, you can figure that out. That's not a feature per se, but you can see how they're talking about it, what they're doing, and that can lead you to, for example, talk about the thing better, so it resonates better. That's better for ads. It's better for what's on the homepage. It's better to how you position against the competition and so on. So that's really helpful, even though it's not a feature. Another like nice example of what you could learn besides features is people do not wake up in the morning and want to change everything and buy new software in their life. They don't wake up every morning saying, "I want new note taking software. I want new task tracking software. I want a new way to do my receipts. I want new accounting software. I want to move my website somewhere else. I want to." Occasionally they do. Like sometimes they do. Obviously, I'm referring to whatever your product is. But most people, most days, are not thinking that. They're not ready to buy, most of the time. So, an interesting question is, what happens or what has happened when they do? Like, what set up that situation, that event, that trigger where they're ready to buy now, today, or at least they're investigating or, they're active? Because usually they're not. And whatever that is much more likely what you should put in things like advertisements or maybe the homepage. Again, instead of maybe the features, it's what's going on that they're going to Google and searching. What's happening in their life? Because that and not your product is actually the hook that you want. And the more you understand that, the easier it's going to be to find people when they're in that moment, as opposed to finding people in general, which is not that helpful, right? So, like an example is backup software. Almost never do you think I need some backup software to back my stuff up. In fact, most people don't think about backup ever. And then one day something crashes, something's broke, you lose something or it crashes, and you don't have a backup, and you're devastated because you've lost important things. Nowadays we have the cloud, so maybe it's not actually not as big a deal as it used to be. But if you lost family photos, that's tragic. If you lost documents you were working on because it wasn't online, that's really bad. Right that moment, I guarantee you'll buy backup software Or you'll buy some cloud stuff where your photos go online, something like that, right? You are going to spend money right now because you'll never want that to happen again. And you'll continue to. Like, if that's $40 a month forever, you're good with that. You'll remember in 3 years how painful that was. You won't stop doing it. So that triggering moment, that's an interesting thing you can glean by talking to customers. So that's the first thing, is like, what are you trying to learn besides features, although also features? Then I make hypotheses about what the answers are. I think people buy security software when they get hacked, but not before. I think that people care about the performance of their site and they know what their performance is and they want it to be faster. These are things that I thought of WP Engine specifically, right? When I was validating WP Engine, these are exactly what my hypotheses, right? I think agencies have lots of clients and they don't have a good way to manage their passwords into all those sites. These are just hypotheses about their life. I write them down explicitly. One reason is that as human beings, if we don't do that, then later when we hear contradictory evidence, if we haven't written it down, we tend to either just disregard the new stuff, right? Because it doesn't fit our worldview.
Yeah.
Or we said, oh, yeah, that's what I always thought, but it's not what you always thought, and you're not learning. So this is just good psychology, is write it down, you're placing the bet, as it were. Okay, the other thing it does is it leads to good questions, because a bad question would look like this. Hey, the internet is full of bad people. You get hacked all the time. You never know when you're next. Would you pay a little more for security online? See how that's kind of a biased question. Also, whether or not they agree, now they sound dumb if they disagree. But they probably do disagree. And the next person that comes to your homepage is not primed like that. You need to know what they actually think. The random, so that's a leading question. So you want to ask questions that are unbiased, not leading, and open ended, so that they just talk about stuff, so that who knows where they go? Who knows what you might learn? I don't even know. So, like, a good open ended question would be like, what do you think about security? Or even something like, do you do anything with web security? And if so, what? How much do you spend or not? How do you think about that? Totally open question. Like, I don't know. And then what you'll find, by the way, is that people will say, oh, yeah, I just have a tiny little site, so I'm never going to get hacked. And they're not worried. Now, that's false. That perspective they have is untrue. 12% of the people that move their site to WP Engine, their website, are already hacked, and they're mostly small. So they're totally wrong about that. But see, I had to know that the only way I could find that out, that they don't think they have a problem. So this is not going to be a good. That's not going to be a good lead. On the other hand, if someone got hacked, then they care. Or if it's a bigger company, they have policies and stuff, and so they do care because they're a bigger company with policies. Oh, okay. So you see what I mean? So by asking open-ended questions, you figure out what people actually think. So these are the kinds of things that I do to try to figure out, what are my goals? What do I think? How does that lead to these open-ended questions? So that, of course, I'll be right about some stuff, wrong about some stuff, there'll be brand new stuff, and even the stuff I'm right about, I could refine it. Like, I could be generally right about how agencies work on sites, but not exactly. And also, there's these other details that are useful. So again, even if I'm right and directionally, I can still learn a lot that's going to be handy in all these things, writing, positioning, and which features I should build, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of thing I do. I do have an article online called the Iterative Hypothesis Method, which details this, and more examples and more stuff of this. So that's an easy place to go for more of that. Now, there's this other thing, though, of like, okay, you do all this and they said they love this feature and then they don't buy it. What do you do about that? Again, I don't have a perfect answer. Like I said, I'm not perfect about that. But here's one technique that I think is better. It's hard to say because, again, it still doesn't work for me sometimes. But I think this is better. What you do is you say, oh, that's great that you want to use this feature. Walk me through exactly how you would use this in a day. Like, what are you doing first? When would you pull this up? Tell me what you'd like literally do. Click on and see and go and like walk me through that. And then they'll start saying like, okay, yeah, yeah. So like I said, I would love to have this report. So what I would do is every week I'm supposed to send this report to my boss. So what I would do is I would go into your tool and I would filter out this thing, blah blah blah, and I would export it. And you'd say, oh wait, that's not what the feature is. Or, oh, you need to export? They're like, oh yeah, yeah, I have to be able to export it so I can put in this other thing. Oh no, I can't show it to my boss. I would have to export. Okay, now you know, like, actually without an export, it's not useful. Or they realize like, oh wait, no, what I really need is this other data. Oh wait, never mind. No, actually, I couldn't use that feature. Like, they kind of talk themselves out of it because they realize when they think through it, actually this doesn't quite make sense for them. So it's much harder for them to just be nice to you and say, yeah, yeah, I'll buy it. It's much harder to do that when you ask them to walk through it, and they often figure things out. Or you figure out, oh wait, there's actually three things I need to do, like have this filter and make this export, right, before it actually is useful to them, and that helps suss that out. So I think that question of walk me through you actually using it, that's a good clarifying one on features. Not perfect, but good. Better than I like the feature. That's definitely better than that.
Yeah. So when a lot of customers are suggesting you ideas and features while you're interviewing, and how do you like maintain focus? How did you maintain focus in WP Engine? In the early days, were you like building so many features, or were you focusing on one thing?
I've
And
never had the problem of being defocused and having too many projects and things. I know that's common for some founders, is they're like, I have all these ideas, and so I'm going to do all of them like 3% and see if one of them catches on, and then I'll devote my attention to it. But the problem is that doing a project at 3% isn't a very good test of whether it'll work or not. These things take all of your effort to see if it'll work. Now, I know there's counterexamples. You can say, wait, what about this person? What about that person? And I'll say, of course. I mean, this is not a law of physics. It's just my opinion. But I'll say for every one of those you can find where they had 10 products and one worked, um, I can show you 100 people that did the same thing and never found a product, and another 100 people where they focused, and that's where they pivoted and they did stuff like that, and then years later perhaps they found success. And had they split it out, they wouldn't have. So yes, but I think it's the small minority. In fact, the fact that you can think of who they are, the few people where it works for them, sort of shows you how much of an exception it is. It's almost never the founding story. Like, think about the founding story of other companies you know. It's almost never that they had 8 products and one worked. Almost never. So it can be done, but it seems like it's not usually the right path. So I never had that problem. I started WP Engine. I was focused on that. Really, I started by doing this method I was talking about with another idea, decided it wasn't so good, then had this idea for WP Engine, again used this method, and it took me 4 months to do 50 customer interviews. So it's not like, it took me it takes a long time to do these damn interviews, but it was clear that, like, no, this is real. It's very easy for me to get people, they're telling me why they want it, and there's these triggers like security and speed that are very clear. And so it was very clear to me that, like, oh wow, this is easy to sell, this is easy to talk about. They're selling me even at a high price relative to what they were paying at the time. Okay, this is feeling really good. And then I didn't get distracted with other projects and things. As far as features goes, yes, it's easy to get too many features, because what happens is you have some customer or even 3 customers ask for something, and like that's enough for you to go make it. Or some big customer or potential big customer says, I'll buy if you do this or something, and so you do it. Or they are a big customer and they ask for stuff and you just do it because you want to keep them happy. These aren't the worst reasons. Like, they're not the worst reasons. But the fact that your one biggest customer wants it is actually not very good validation. Either there really are thousands of others like that one, in which case, are you selling to them? Are you marketing to them? Are you actually bringing them on? In which case, great. Are you sure there's 1,000 of them like that? Or there isn't. They're an outlier. They're weird. In which case, you can spend a tremendous amount of your effort on that one biggest customer, and miss the whole company, which is those tens of thousands of other customers that are actually in your target space, that are profitable, that you don't have to spend all this time with. That's like where you should be spending your attention. So which is it? Of course, in the abstract, you don't know. I don't know, right? But I think we tend to latch onto those things because they're right in front of our face and do it, rather than being a little bit more careful and thoughtful about, is this really my ideal type of customer, or am I just happy they're paying me a lot of money? Again, it's a good reason, good motive. It's understandable, not necessarily the best prioritization, though.
so, from the beginning, from an idea, I've noticed a common pattern with all of the successful companies right now. I mean, most of the successful companies. It started from a small market that grew larger, right? The same thing happened for WordPress. It was gaining momentum at the time you were building, but it wasn't like super huge,
Yes, it
right?
was.
It was super huge.
It was 11% of the internet. That's super huge by any standard. The
Yeah,
internet is a
that.
big place. 11% of it is very big. Now it's 43% of the internet. Okay, that's even more enormous, but I mean, 11% of the internet is crazy big. I mean, even today, things like Shopify, Wix, Squarespace, none of them are even close to that today. And they're all like 15 or 20 years old. None of them were even close to WordPress was when I started WP Engine 14 years ago. And we're, so no, like, and when WordPress first started, it was the age of blogging. There was a lot of bloggers, a lot. Like that was the thing to do. It was before social media, but after the internet, and blogging was the thing. It's also why I started blogging. So even then, there was a large and growing market, at least large relative to a brand new company. A million people is a lot of target market if you're small. Now, I get what you're saying, and it's true that, of course, it's a good idea to start in a niche and then see from there. Maybe you stay there, maybe you grow out of there. I don't know. Like both seem very reasonable strategies depending on your goals and depending on what you're able to execute. It all sounds like a good path. Of course, it's good because when you're new, when the company's new, the product's new. Of course, the product doesn't do very much. It's new, right? And if there's incumbents, products that already do stuff, they probably cover the general cases pretty well. So you need some sort of edge, and the edge is not going to be stuff like has more features. That won't be the edge that you have, right? Because you're small. So it just stands to reason that, well, sure, that product is fine, or maybe it's not, but let's just assume it is fine for most people. But if you're in this niche, whatever it is, there's a better way. Like you probably care about X and not Y, and you would rather have all these features over here that other people wouldn't even know what you're talking about, or would consider it bad or busy or confusing, or just it would be a negative to other people. But you in this niche, you wish it happened. So I can do that. I can have a product that doesn't have many features but has the right ones for a niche, and then I am the best product for the niche. I'm genuinely the best, not just saying it. So it just stands to reason that a niche is a good place for a new company to be. Again, not don't have to, but it just makes sense to for that reason. Those are the constraints you have, right? And so those are the constraints you're under. So here's a way for you to be the best anyway. Oh, good.
So it is hard to found a company where a lot of incumbents are there and it has already grown, right? What was your internal gut check? Like why did you start a company where it's really tough at that point? The market is already grown, it's competitive. It was competitive, right? At
Well,
point.
it's yes and no. It was very competitive to be a shared host. It still is, where you charge $2 a month and you get cPanel, and it's up to you to like do everything. That's still competitive. It's still a commodity. It's still low dollar, low profit, low growth. So yeah, that if that's what I started, it would be like that. But it's not. I was charging 10 times as much per month, and the websites were 10 times faster. They would work under scale. If you picked up the phone, someone who knew about WordPress would answer the phone. So you were getting a very different service. On the one hand, so technically what you would say is we had very little competition, maybe even no competition directly, but a lot of alternatives, a whole ocean of alternatives. So in other words, other people charging kind of what we charge and saying they do what we do, almost none, but other ways for the customers to achieve what they want. Oh yeah, like you're saying, an ocean of things. So um, that's a great place to be because that ocean shows how much demand there is, and that's great. Often the problem is there's no demand. So you say it's hard to start a company like that. Actually, it's super easy because all the demand is there. There's already people, they're already spending money, they already ask people where to go, they already search on Google, they already respond to ads, they already understand what the space is. Actually, it does a lot of easy stuff about it. Now, if you have nothing different, nothing special, then yeah, then it's a little harder. But even then, you might be able to get some percentage of people anyway, just by chance. And
Yeah.
again, like, of course, you're going to do something special. It doesn't have to be revolutionary and disruptive. It doesn't have to be that. Just a little special. Maybe it's the attitude of your company, right? Maybe most people are corporate and you're not. And that's part of what makes you special. Even if the product's the same or the design is really nice. Great. Like it could be features, it could be the niche you pick, it could be your personality, it could like there's a lot of things. Language. Okay, that's great, but I'm in Norway and mine's in Norwegian and others aren't. Perfect. There's so many ways to be special. You could call that a niche if you want, whatever, like whatever you want to call that. There's lots of ways to be special and small. And so there you go. And so if it's a huge market and you can be special in an area, that's a perfect way to start a company. And in fact, what's funny is this is a great example. There are so many companies that are just another shared hosting company that sells cPanel at $2 a month. There's whole conferences people go to of people who do this. It's all identical. It's super easy to start one of those companies. There's even software you can get off the shelf that runs the whole company. It runs the tech, it runs your billing. Like you can, it's like a company in a box. So even though it's completely commoditized, it's actually trivial to go start those companies. And so, can you build a $10 billion company that way? That'll be hard because, as you say, it's a mature market and that part's already kind of done. But if you were a person, a solo person, you're like, look, if I could just make, let's say, low tens of thousands of dollars a month in profit, if I could get to that, I'd be thrilled. Okay, well then this is a good business to start. You might want something special again. Maybe it's your brand or your location. Okay, but again, like whatever. Like this is a great business to start, even though there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of them right now, big and small. It's just right. So there's clearly room for another one if there's already 1,000 of them, right? So, I mean, big crowded markets are often actually a good place. Again, it depends on your goals. If your goal is to build the next GoDaddy, you probably wouldn't want to be a super late starter in a mature market. That is a bad strategy, right? But if your goal is I want to make a lot of money for myself with my own business, oh my gosh, there's so many choices.
So, what you were saying about pricing more in WP Engine, I think I've heard something similar from Mark Andreessen about building moat and stuff. When you increase your price, it actually builds a moat to your company. Do you believe in that? Like, is that why you did that?
It goes the other way. If you can charge a very high price and people stay, you must have a moat. Because
Yeah.
why are they staying? You must have something that they value and they can't get somewhere else. Because if they don't value it and they can get what they do value somewhere else, why would they pay twice as much or 10 times as much? So it's not that it is a moat, it's that it indicates that you have a moat. It indicates you have something special that others can't compete with. Certainly can't compete on price. That's the direction it goes. Now, there could be lots of reasons why you have it. I have an article about this as well. If you look for willingness to pay, you'll see it. But the general idea is this: there are various reasons why people will be with you, with your company, and even if you charge a lot and all this kind of stuff. So say, okay, what are they? Because I want to do that, right? So the best reasons are reasons of love. They love your personality, so they want to support your company. They love that you're a new company and not a big corporation. They want to support it. They love that you're a local company and not some American company. Perfect. They love that you focus on their niche and other people ignore them. They love that you have special features others don't, and they think it's great. They love that you have terrific design. You clearly put so much effort into the design. They just love you for that, and they want to reciprocate. They love that you have a community that you run that's actually genuinely great. Like you join it, people are like, oh yeah, welcome, we're happy to help, and da. WordPress is a lot like this, right? And so it's so welcoming. You just feel like, oh my gosh, I love this place, I just. And then if anyone tries to attack, you're like, no, no, these are my friends, like that can be a reason of love, right? There's more, but you get the idea. Like the reasons people genuinely just actually have this love for you for good, positive reasons. That's the best reason. um,
So, it's like you have to build a brand for yourself and you have to let people
brand
know.
is the handle that people are holding on to, but what is it that they love about it? Coke is also a great brand. I don't know if I have that affinity for Coke. Maybe some people do. I don't know, right? So it's not just that you've built a brand, it's that you are something. You stand for something. Another one is a higher purpose. Maybe your company cares about certain cause and the product helps with that cause or all your profits go to that cause. There's another reason why people might want to be with you, even if you charge a lot, because they love that you support that cause that they also love, right? So these are all reasons to love the company. That's the best reasons. The second best and still good, still constructive, is that it's useful. It's a good product. It does what I want. And it's a little ugly, but you know what? It does the job. Okay, this is great. Like that's mostly what it is, right? Like no problem. There's many other kinds though. Like for example, okay, our whole company is trained on this now. So if we were to move to a competitor, we'd have to retrain everyone. That's a big cost. So we don't want to switch. Even if the competitor was 20% cheaper or had this one feature we wanted, it's kind of not good enough to get us to go through that pain. Now, that's a reason why people are staying. It's not because they love you to death. It's because it would be a pain in the butt to switch. It's the utility isn't there to switch, but not for a bad reason. You didn't lock them in. You're not, keeping them there. It's just a fact that, like, it's. Yeah, I mean, this is what I use. It's fine. It's what I'm used to. Nothing wrong with that. So this is why it's neutral. It's a good reason. There's many more utility type things like that. And then the worst reasons are kind of, you could say, well, I say coercive, meaning like they're forcing you to stay against your will. Sometimes you could even question if it's ethical, but sometimes it's perfect. It's ethical. It's just like, ugh, yuck. Right? It's the opposite of love. So an example is data lock-in. Like I can't export my data. So if I leave this product, I've lost all my history. I've lost all my detail. I have to reconstruct it. I may want to leave anyway, but man, that's keeping me in. But not for a good reason. Not because the product's useful to me, not because I love it, but because I kind of like you've made it hard to leave, which is kind of, is it unethical? That's up for each person to decide if that's unethical or not. But who cares? The point is that it's not a positive, right? Another reason could be the law. The law requires me to buy this product. Okay, well, you're making me.
There's no choice.
Like I don't know, that sucks, but all right, a 3-year lock-in contract is kind of like that. It's not illegal, of course. Shouldn't be illegal, but like if I'm still here in 2 years, it's not necessarily because I want to be. So there's all these kind of coercive things. They work. It just it's maybe the worst reasons. So I think really successful companies often have all of these. Apple has all of these. People love Apple in certain ways, and also Apple is useful in certain ways. A useful thing is their stuff like talks to each other. Like all my devices just sync things like contacts and notes and stuff very easily. That's nice utility. I don't know if I love that, but it's really good utility.
And it's
But
really hard to switch from Apple to
yeah,
other products. Yeah.
yeah, like how do I can I switch out of iMessage into SMS or WhatsApp? Not really. Can I export out of Notes? I'm not really sure. Eh. So that's kind of on the coercive side, right? So again, like these aren't absolutes. It's just they're categories to think about because the more you're in the love or utility, the better, the happier customers are. And not just I'm not talking about better like morally or ethically. Maybe that too, if you care about that, maybe too that too. But that's actually not what I mean. I mean there's actually stronger forces because when the forces are a love of or utility, your customers are on your side. Like with love, your customers are going out and telling the world they should also buy from you. That's growth. Like forget ethics. That's growth. People who are locked into stuff they hate, they're going out in the world and telling people that they hate it. That's not good, right? For whatever, right? That hurts your growth. It hurts your brand. It hurts your reputation. It's not good. Customers are always looking for a reason to leave. That's not a good relationship to have, and that's not going to be good for your overall health. So just for pure selfish reasons, it's better for your health and profit and all this stuff to be on the love side, maybe utility also, of course, and less on the coursive side for that reason. So you want people saying, "God, I just love them." Yeah, they actually make it. Believe it or not, they make it super easy to leave. But I'm not. But I love that they. But you know what? I love that they don't make me. That's the kind of stuff you want people saying, just because that's the kind of stuff they'll get the next person to buy, isn't it? And that they'll leave better reviews, and you'll have higher reviews, and that will help your growth too. And so I do think it's a good way to think of it, not because you could never do the course of stuff, not that reason, but just the more you go on one side, then the healthier and better your company will be, and just you'll have a better relationship with your customers anyway. It feels better, I think.
So we were talking about retaining customers, right? So in the B2B space right now, a lot of founders are building into it, right? And some companies have a lot of competition, and people just have a lot of alternatives at the same time.
Yeah.
So how would you recommend founders to get their first 10 or 30 paying customers and build retention at the same time?
Yeah, so those are really different things. To get your first 10 or 30 customers, there's so many techniques. You could probably go ask ChatGPT, what are 30 ways for me to get just my first 10 or 30 customers? And it will give you a whole bunch of reasonable techniques. And so you pick some that are more in your wheelhouse. Like if there's so many social media networks that you could use, right, but you're probably not good at them all. you know, you might just pick one that you feel more comfortable in and do it. Some people love cold prospecting, like sending emails or in-mails on LinkedIn. Other people hate it. It's the worst thing ever. So there's a million ways, easy to find, huge lists of ways. Pick some that seem to match what you think you can execute, right? And also where your customers are. So it could be that like, look, there's 10 newsletters and almost everyone in this industry reads one of them. Okay, then that's where you need to be. Is it an ad? It could be, but maybe you can't afford that right away, especially if these are popular newsletters. But maybe you can do a guest post, or maybe you can write something so valuable on your site, but then ask see if you can get one of them to run a link because it's actually good. And so it's actually good for the newsletter to promote it because it's actually good. I mean, these are of course very basic things. You scratch and claw to get your first 10 or 30 customers, but the question of how to retain is totally different because everything I just said has nothing to do with retention. So retention is of course the key because if they leave, it just means they didn't actually want the product. It meant they believed in your advertisement, they believed in your homepage, they believed that the price was fair because they got through the pricing page and paid. So I guess they thought that was a good trade, they got through all that, and then when they actually tried to use the product, they were like, "No, oh
It
man,
didn't
that
work for
that
me.
sucks." Now, sometimes you've got the wrong person and they signed up anyway, and it really was never the right person. That's true. That can happen. So, in other words, maybe your marketing is wrong. Maybe you're promising the wrong thing to the wrong people. That's possible. But it's also possible the product just doesn't fit right. Maybe you don't have the right features. Maybe, again, it doesn't work in their workflows, like we were just saying. Maybe they sort of had the problem, but it was not that big of a pain. So it's like, yeah, it's okay. It's just I've got too many other things to work on. I just don't have time to look at this. It's cool, but I have three other things that are more important. That's a very common thing of like I have this problem, but it's like number 7 on my list. They may not even have a list that detailed, but let's just say logically speaking, it's number 7, and they got to work on items 1 through 3 because that's all the time they have, right? That's a very common one. How do you find out? Super hard because once they cancel, they often don't want to talk to you. And if they do, they often just want to like they're just like, yeah, yeah, it was too expensive, or yeah, I just didn't need it, or yeah, yeah. And like you're not really getting the real answer. Like I love it's too expensive because it's like, but you already knew what it cost and you bought it. So why are you now saying it's
Yeah.
too, you see, like it's not that they don't think that. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's just that's not the real reason that you're trying to find out. It's not expensive
So
because we thought it would do X and it doesn't, and therefore it's too expensive. Is that what you meant? You see what I mean? Like there's something else that it really is when they say it's too expensive and yet bought it. If they said it's too expensive and didn't buy it all, maybe it's too expensive. Okay, gotcha. But if they bought it, then the excuse that it's too expensive doesn't make any sense. It's that's some kind of other excuse that's shrouding the real answer. So it's very hard after the fact to get at that. You should try anyway because like you really want to know, but but it's hard to get it. So you got to be talking to them before they cancel. And since you don't know who's going to cancel, that means you have to be talking to customers. Period. You should do that forever, but especially when you have 10 or 30, as you just said, there's no reason why you shouldn't be talking to all of them. You have time to talk to all of them. So you should. Maybe it's based on triggers. Oh, you got to this point in the product, so now I'm asking you about that. Or, oh, you have been inactive for a week. Uh-oh, that's a sign maybe that you're going to cancel. I better reach out really hard to try to get in touch with you before you actually do cancel. So you could try to be smart like that, right? And try to see what they're doing. And so that would be the best to be smart about it. There's tools that help with that. But maybe you're not that sophisticated or don't want to be. That's also okay. Then just freaking reach out every 3 days to every customer and ask how it's going. Like even that, most of them won't want to talk to you most of the time, but some will. And like that's again, it's hard. You're scratching and clawing. It's very hard to get at it. Um, so that's what you do is you try to get to people first. The other thing is it's easy to focus on the people who are not succeeding, and you should. But what about the people that are succeeding? What are they like? What is common to the people where they do use it every day and they stay forever? What are they like? And then how are they different from the people that leave? Now, this seems obvious. How do the people that stay different and leave? It sounds obvious, right? But people often don't do this. Here's what people often do they say, the last 10 people that canceled complained about X. So X is a problem we've got to fix. But what they didn't ask is, but what about the people who stayed? Yeah, what if they also complain about X, but they stayed anyway? Doesn't that mean that X is actually not the key? It's wait a minute, but they left and they stayed and both of them saw X. That means X is not X still may be something you want to fix. That might be true, but it's not the reason they left. It's that other thing that was true of one and not the other. That's actually the reason they left. Oh, you see what I mean? So it sounds obvious to say, but you see how it's very easy to not follow that advice, right? And see the difference there. X might be common to both. So You still might want to fix X. Fair enough. Like maybe everyone's happier, and in fact, people would stay if you fixed X. So it's not that you're totally wrong, but that difference is where you get to the real truth of like, oh, yeah, everyone complains about X, so we should fix it. But the real reason is that people in this industry, or with this size company, or with this budget, or with this position at the company, they stay. And these other people, they have the problem, but it's not their main job, or they have the problem, but they're not at a big enough company, or they have and so they leave when they run into a barrier like X. When they run into a problem like X, they're like, these other people are actually my better customers, and I should focus on those better ones because they stay even despite X being a problem. That's what I want. I want more people to stay despite my problems. That sounds even better. So you see how, like, actually when you do this, you start getting really much better insights, even if you should also fix X.
So we spoke about, you told right, there are millions of ways to get your first customers. There was one way, it was kind of unique, but I think now it's getting popular. I was speaking to a founder and he told that doing podcasts are the best way he gets his customers. Like, what do you think about this? At the early stage, is podcast is a kind of like a project, right? Can this be scalable? What's
Well,
your opinion on this?
yeah, I guess it depends on what it depends. So you're right. Podcast is a lot of work, and so what I would say is, like, obviously sometimes that's good, but it's a big commitment. And so what I would say is, first of all, is this only to get new customers, or do you really think making a podcast is a permanent part of what makes your company special, part of its brand, part of its everything? The more it's something that you think is just this permanent special aspect of your company, then that's a reason to do it. Like that adds, like, okay, so not only are you doing this in order to get a new customer, but also this is part of what you think is special about your company. That's a better reason. And it better be that marketing through your by having a podcast is better than AdWords, is better than advertising, is better than social media, is better than a newsletter, is better than guest posting. Like, you have a lot of alternatives, and many of them are cheaper or easier or less time than a podcast. So but if you're like, no, 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 it's a podcast. Here's why, blah, blah, blah. I really love podcasting, or my customers love listening to podcast, or whatever, or there's not a good podcast in my area. I could be that. Okay, now we're talking. Now, like, these are some good reasons, you know? So the more there's like good reasons, I'm like, oh, okay. So there's many pieces of value you get from this podcast. Well, that sounds pretty good. That's leveraging your time. Whereas if you're like, no, 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 the podcast will never be good for that. It's just for new customers. I would say, okay, well, it's not a deal breaker, but it sounds like not a very good ROI, not a very good use of your time. If the only way to get a customer is one by one in this super expensive, slow way, I mean, if the dollar value is high, you could be back to good. If the dollar value is low, this is not a way. This is not good. Now, on the other hand, you might say, no, 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 I know all that, but if you have a podcast, it's really easy to get people to come on it. They love it. They get interviewed. They think they're important, even if there's no listeners. They don't care. And so I'm not going to do this forever. I'm just going to do this for 100 customers because it's a way to talk to 100 people. And I know it's a tactic. I know it's a trick. I'm not going to put any more effort into it than it is required to make my trick work. Again, I would go back to, oh, that sounds smart again. Now you're thinking about it as, I'm only going to do just enough because this is so much better than, I don't know, a cold email through LinkedIn. Who the hell's going to answer that? And I would say, yeah, you're right about that. I have to agree with that. So that's just I guess that's a detailed way of saying, my first reaction is, sounds like a lot of work, but these are all these reasons why I would think, oh, in that case, sounds like a good idea.
So, coming back to raising money, you've done both. You've done bootstrapping as well as you've raised money and built companies.
Mm.
So, when you think companies should actually choose to raise money and choose to bootstrap, like, what's your framework if you are starting out right now and you are new to this and you have some amount of money?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is you should always bootstrap unless a whole bunch of conditions are met. And even then, the best way to raise money is first bootstrap to something, because then you have proof points, and then when you raise money on that, way better terms, way easier to get money at all because you've proven that something's going. Even if it's 30 customers paying whatever, like, that's a lot. Like, a lot of people have nothing. So I mean, even just 30 people who have stayed for, 6 months and say nice things. I mean, that's some pretty good validation compared to a lot of people raising money. The reason is, first of all, almost all companies are bootstrapped, like period, in the world of any industry. VCs don't fund that much stuff in terms of N. Like, how many companies do VCs fund a year? A thousand, thousands, but millions of companies start a year. Okay, so most companies don't do that. So that's one reason why it's a default answer. Another thing is nowadays, of course, it is cheap to do stuff. It's cheap to take a credit card. It's cheap to have a website. It's cheap to build software. Um, and so, of course, not everything is cheap. If you want to compete with Tesla, it's not cheap. Yeah, I know that. Of course, there's some
Yeah.
companies that are made such that they're not cheap. Or AI models. You want to build a new AI model? Okay, I guess it's going to cost $500 million for the compute and the engineers. Okay, I get it. Like, of course, something. But the vast majority of things, of course, are not like that. And so you can build it. And and again, like when you do that, the validation you have is great. And also you have choice. You could choose to raise money or not. You could choose to raise just from angels or a small amount or some kind of alternative funds or something more institutional. Like, you have all these choices if you started to make a real company. So that's also in your favor. It's hard fundraising right now, especially because we're in this kind of post 2022 environment where it's everyone's crazy about AI, and it's hard to get it. People are just still holding onto their money pretty tight because interest rates are high and so on. So it's just a hard time anyway. All the more reason, like, okay, well, who cares? I don't need that. I will have to put in my own time. I'll have to, keep my day job or consult or whatever I'm doing. So that means I'm effectively working two jobs. That's right. It'll consume your whole life. That's correct. But it also means you can do it. So, and if you have a co-founder, it's easier because you have two people who are doing this. But also, that one of the biggest reasons companies fail is that co-founders break up. So co-founders are one of these things where it's high variance. It is both gives you more on the upside, both more lift, more good stuff when it's good, and it also maybe is bad when it's bad. So for that reason, I think for co-founders, you should just look at your own personality. There are people who are like, look, I really want to do it myself. Good, then don't bring another person in, or vice versa. I love being on a team, or especially the kind of team where they complement each other's skills rather than have the same skills. Two engineers, actually not that interesting, but a team where it's like, oh, one person is outward facing, loves people, loves like a natural salesperson, and the other person's an engineer, an introvert, but they get incredible amounts done per day because they just stay in the hole and, and code and don't, and so you can operate the company like that's some of the best things ever. That's how what I was like at IT Watchdogs. I was the engineer in the hole, and so that can be extremely effective. Leveraging each other's strengths and doing what you love and are good at. I mean, that can be absolutely amazing. So hard to answer the question in general of whether I have co-founders, but it's part of this answer of how do I make these companies, because bootstrapping, if both people are doing it, you're getting more done, and that staves off perhaps having to raise money. The other thing is there's lots of kinds of money. Like, raising from angels can look like all kinds of things. If you're raising from institutions, though, they need you to become a unicorn. Now, they don't have to make the portfolio work, etc. But like, everything needs at least the potential to, and they're going to drive you to do that, and they should. Like, that's the only thing that makes sense for them. But you might say, yeah, but most companies, like, they'll never be worth $1 billion, and they shouldn't. Like, that's just not what they are. It's not their natural state. It doesn't make any sense. And P.S. Like, surely that's not the only way we can have success in life. Is if a company's worth $1 billion. Like, that's a measure, but clearly it's not. I mean, once again, almost every successful company and person on Earth is not that. So clearly that's not the definition of success, even if you agree that it's a one of many definitions of success, right? Okay, well, if most companies shouldn't even try, it's not what they should do. Um, well, then don't raise money from institutions, because that's their goal. Don't align yourself with people with different goals. That's nobody's fault. It's not their fault for being mean investors, as some people like to say. No, they just have these goals, and if you don't, what are you doing asking them for money? Like, don't do that.
So I want to talk about acquisition. I know you talk about this a lot, and I've seen a talk of yours. It burn out to $100 million, I guess, from Saster, and you mentioned about the Minecraft founder. He thought it was best for him to sell the company. Now, some founders think that selling the company is the best way, and some founders like love to build and grow even more, right? But what is the reality of going through an acquisition? How painful it is?
I mean, I guess there's some people who, it's true, there's some people who want to run their companies until they die. But I don't know that that's most people. The kind of person who's like, I don't want a regular job, I want to make my own company, is that the same kind of person that wants to do the same job for 30 years? It could be because it's yours. Could be. If you run a restaurant, that could very well be the case. So, of course, that could be. Another thing is you change over time. You could start one way thinking you're going to sell or not, and then change. Because 5 years later, 10 years later, it's just different. You're older. You didn't think you'd be tired of it, but you are. It's kind of stagnant, or it's growing like crazy, and you're like, oh, I don't even like being at a big company. So I want to leave because I don't like being at a big company. That might mean you sell it. It might not. There's obviously many choices if you have a large growing company. But either way, the idea that you're not going to be there but financially benefit somehow. Um, that may or may not be what you set out to do. Or it did pretty well, but then it leveled off and now it's shrinking. And actually, being at a shrinking company where you're having to fire people sometimes and just everything's a struggle and everything sucks. I mean, are you sure you want to just do that? Like watch that just die for 5 years, and that's what you do too? Is you just sit there and struggle and die instead of sell it, try to get some money out of it, and then be able to reset, shake it off, and try something else. So you don't know. It's not even like I'm this type of person or not. It is also that, but also there's circumstances, and also you change, and like it's complicated. Um, you don't know when you're selling whether it's the right choice. And after the fact, you don't know whether you made the right choice. And sometimes even 10 years later, you don't know either. Because you can't run the things again. Like, even if 10 years later, oh, this happened and that happened. Yeah, but you couldn't have known that, first of all. And also, if you were there running the company, would you have made the right decisions? It's just none of these things are knowable. Um,
Do
so
you
even,
regret right now that you sold SmartPad too early on?
no,
Have you?
no, not at all. Yeah, I mean,
That
it grew in value by, I don't know, between 50 and 100 times after I sold it. But I didn't do that, and I wasn't on a trajectory to do that. Had I been at the helm doing what I was doing, that's not what would have happened. The people that bought it had a different strategy. They executed it well for 10 years, a strategy I would never do. Like, you sold too early. No, 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 no. Like, that's a totally different thing. I'm very happy for them because great. That's nice, but like, it's nothing to do with me. And then I was able to do WP Engine, which also has been
that
even more successful, and that is something I was a part of the whole time. And so, you know, it's really edifying. And but anyway, but even if it wasn't like that's not, you couldn't have known that. The good you couldn't have known, the bad you couldn't have known either. So this is just not knowable. So it's not. It's fine to look at like, did I learn any lessons? Is there something I want to carry forward? That's useful because that's constructive. How do I get wiser? How do I understand more about myself? These are good questions. But second guessing everything, it could have been this or that, what if that, those are not, those aren't even real. You can't even really answer those. That's not even the truth. So they're not useful to you, and they're not even accurate. So no, I wouldn't do that. No, you could say it's easy for me to say because everything turned out good. You're right. I don't know what to say to that. That's just what I think, and I have no defense against that claim, um, except just to say I've seen other people too, and with various kinds of outcomes, whether they sold or not, and what happened afterwards in all four of those cases in the rubric. And in none of them do I think they could have known or this or that. You just have to do like in poker. There's luck and your decisions. So all you control is, have I made the best decisions with the information I have? That you can control. I think something to regret is if you made the decision for bad reasons. I didn't think it through. I didn't look at these other options. I didn't even consider these other options at all. So it's not like I made a choice. I didn't actually know what my choices were, and I should have found out what my choices were. That I should have done. See, but now we're talking about evaluating the quality of your decision, and that I think is useful to analyze. That I make a good decision, I make the decision in the right way. That's good. But the rest of it, that's luck or out of your control. That's not useful to second guess, I think.
have you found any misconception around from founders around acquisition?
Of course, nobody's done it before, so they don't know anything about it. So everything's a misconception. They think they'll be happy.
Right,
They're
that's
not.
right.
They, even if it's the right thing to do, it's bittersweet. Like it's always going to be bittersweet, right? On the one hand, you've lost your identity because your company is your identity. On the other hand, maybe you got some money. Okay, well that's bittersweet right there. The company does or doesn't do this or that after, and you do or don't this or that, and you find yourself or you don't. You find the next thing or not, or it's better or it's not. Who knows? Whatever that is definitely going to be bittersweet. So that's what it's going to be.
So this is kind of going to be the last question. I'll show the screenshot. I'll just present a screenshot to you.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, this is from an excerpt. It's an excerpt from a podcast. Like Brian Chesky was speaking about how he felt after hitting IPO
Mm-hmm.
and about loneliness. I'll read it out. As I became a CEO, I started leading from the at the top of the mountain. But then, the higher you get to the peak, the fewer people there are with you. No one ever told me how lonely you would get, and I wasn't prepared for that. I had this guilt about not working because so much of my life was about being successful. Probably if I were to dig deep, because I thought you would make that it would make people love me. And the day of our IPO, we reached $100 billion valuation. It was amazing. Like I'd gone to the mountain, and then I wake up the next day, and my life is exactly the same. I'm alone. I wake up, I put on my sweatpants, I go onto iMac, and I have like 10 to 12 hours of Zoom meetings, and I just don't really have much of my life outside of work. My work has my life. So my question is, if a young person is watching this and they love building companies, but at the same time they don't want to fall into the pit that Brian fell into.
Mm-hmm.
They want to have life experiences as well as build a successful company. Is that possible? Like, could founders live a balanced life?
Um, Founders can, but you don't get everything. I think, for example, you could decide to build a company that's very profitable but small, and then so that if you get to this steady state where it's profitable, you're not trying to grow it all the time. You have a couple other people you can rely on, so it's not just you. And then maybe you can have a balanced life. It's not going to start that way. No company starts with a balanced life to get it started. That's no way. Um, but it's sort of like if you wanted to get good at chess, you could get to a certain place and then just maintain, and it would be pretty easy to maintain and not study that much. You're not going to get good at chess by never studying. No, like that's going to be hard. Then you can maybe like level off and not study that much and just have your little things that you do. That'd be fine. Or like a stand-up comedian. At first you suck and it's going to take a lot of work to do better. There's no doubt about it. You could get to where you have a pretty good set and you never change it, do the same set for 10 years. It's kind of lame, but like you can totally, people do that all the time. You can do that, right? So I think you could do that. You could make a company and then coast, but you have to design it right. If you're required for everything, then you can't coast anymore. If it's not profitable, very profitable, you can't coast anymore. If it's, you know, so you have to ask like, wait, what are all the constraints that would have to go onto this company about how it works and what it is, what the product is, and how we get customers, how we keep them, how the operations work? What are all those? What constraints would I need so that I could actually do that? Because most companies don't have those, right? But some do. Or you could not be the freaking CEO. That's what I did. I'm not the CEO of WP Engine, right? And 11 years ago, I stopped being the CEO of WP Engine. Well, that's a little easier. Right now, I have no direct reports. None. Oh, well, that's a little easier. That's a couple of fewer meetings I have to go to every week, right? So you could decide I'm the founder, but not the CEO. In fact, I'm gonna over time. I mean, I started as a CEO for years, right? But like over time, I'm gonna choose not to be this executive or this, that, the other thing. I'm gonna choose to have a different role. Now I'll have less power, I'll have less say, I'll have less visibility, I'll have less experiences in certain ways. There's a trade-off. So there's another example of how you could do that. Just like maybe what you trade off is you're not the CEO, you're something else. That's another way to do it. So in general, startups eat up all your time. In general, if you want a balanced life, you probably just shouldn't be at a startup at all. The best way to have a balanced life is be a good worker at a big company that doesn't really know what you're doing and it's fine, and then you can have a balanced life. So that's the easiest way. But I just gave you a couple of ways that you could be the founder of a startup and have one. It's not easy. And probably the company, if the company's not doing well, you don't have a balanced life. I mean, but of course
Right.
not, because it's not doing well. Like it's it's not working. Like of course, but yeah, if you think about like what would have to be true for this to be balanced? Okay, then there's some answers.
So, like in your case, how balanced is it? Like, how would you define your life? Is your definition of life work? Like,
I don't know what a balance
it
is.
was before.
No,
It
I
was
don't like,
before.
this is again one of these things I don't even know what it means, because balance, does that mean equal parts of each? Because of course it's not equal parts of each. Like I don't know what it means. If it means both, then yeah. I think nowadays people have a much more integrated sense. It may be that the first thing you do is check email, but also you work out at 11 a.m. And sometimes you do email at night, but sometimes you take off the whole afternoon. So I think people are starting to get a more integrated sense of what it means. I don't even know the balance is the right word. Integrated certainly sounds like a good word. Are you healthy? Are you there with people that you care about? Are you putting all of your effort into the company? Besides all that, these are probably some good questions. So that's probably a good place to wrap it up. I think people have to have their own definition of what a good life is and integrate those things.
Yeah, this has been amazing, Jason. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was
Um,
fun.
Totally.